Well, good afternoon. My name is Christopher Starling. I'm the curator of the Inner Life Archive 2.0. Today I'm in conversation with James Felton Keith, a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. I am supporting Corey with the Recognize Our Pride Month edition, where we interview members who are queer of the Divine Nine community. Welcome, James.
Thanks for having me. This is new. This is, what y'all are doing is pretty youthful and revolutionary. So I
say more. What's new about it?
I mean, we wouldn't. I'm assuming I'm a little bit older than you. I crossed Kappa 21 years ago, so this didn't exist. Obviously, we wouldn't have had a conversation about being queer and out, or even queer. That's a new word for me. Yeah, I grew up in the 80s, so it was a bad word, and now it's sort of an intellectual word brought into mainstream culture. So I have friends my age, 10 years older than me, who are like, just in corporate spaces, are we allowed to say it? Is it this? Is it that? And I'm like, the kids are saying it, so you can say it. And we're all learning new things. The world is a 20-year-old, and they're holding all of us hostage for the better, I think. I work in corporate change management, and these kids are what change. They change because of how we raised them. They change how we engage each other, how we sell products and services, and they change these organizations that we're in. I've met more than a few young brothers from my chapter. I pledged down at Tuskegee in 2002, and brothers are out, online doing their thing. Others are finding their way later because different people are at different places in their lives. Different people identify different ways. I identify as bi. I meet young people who talk about pansexuality, and I talk to them about erasure of the bi people from back in the day, which is sort of how I got involved in the activism. And, just thinking about all those things, it's, every 5 years is something radically new. And I think, since 2015, I think since the Supreme Court ruling for marriage equality, it seems like things have been growing exponentially, or just changing exponentially. And, I think young people are the driver for that because they're self-identifying early. When I went to college, my number one objective was just to have, the prettiest girlfriend and be popular as possible. I was sort of a stereotypical toxic Kappa. I was the worst. I was the best at being the worst, which I'm not proud of, but I try to leverage as an opportunity to be introspective and self-correct. So,
How did you grow out of that? How did it evolve?
That's difficult to I really think from hitting rock bottom a lot. I lived a lot of my life, working as a consultant. So I traveled abroad a lot. It gave me a lot of time to essentially run away from what my brand was, who I was here, at home. The Kappa from Tuskegee, right? The light-skinned Kappa from Tuskegee from Detroit.
The Cane Master.
The Cane Master guy, right? That thing too. Yeah. I would come home to twirl. So I think that got me a lot more even cachet within the fraternity, within the organization. I got to meet a lot of brothers because I was traveling and twirling, etc. But I think in my personal life, both from a professional standpoint and then from a personal standpoint, really get into a place where I was at risk of losing a lot, like a lot of stature or a lot of money. I did lose a lot of people's money. I've been a bit of an entrepreneur throughout my career while holding different jobs, which has sort of led me into where I am now. And I think a lot of it required me to be the best version of myself in order to weather through some of these problems, but also to lead organizations of people. I got a lot of early privilege to run some large organizations really early. And I found, and I had, advisors and mentors that would let me know, you will not be able to move around all these 50-year-olds in your late 20s unless you are more diligent and know what the hell you're doing more than they do. Not that you can know everything that they know, but also, and that you're leading them in an authentic way. And authenticity, back then didn't mean, how people talk about it now, but it sort of did mean showing up at work or showing up everywhere. You couldn't sort of be one person from 9 to 5 and a different person from, 5 to 9, assuming everyone sleep after 9 o'clock. Cause like at this age, I usually go to sleep around 10. So I'm close to the bed at 9 so I can wake back up at 5. But the point is, I had to gradually, step into my truth in order for it to change my career. I sort of hit a point in my late 20s or really around 30 where I was the executive. And the thing that they don't tell you about the C-suite, different from being a manager at a company, so I was sort of forced out via work, is that everyone in the C-suite, they want to know you intimately. They want to know, what sort of quirks you have, if you like to drive race cars in the walls, if you're violent, if you beat your kids, cheat on your wife, they want to know because they're going to war with you per that company. And they want to make sure that when you're in the foxhole with them, and I know there are a lot of war analogies around business, but they work because a lot of the business that folks are in are wars. And I just remember dealing with old executives, my grandparents' age, and they're like, if we can't know you well, you'll never get that raise. You'll never get that position. And I was, I was sweating. I was like, I don't know how to tell them, who I really am. So,
did you find support? Did you have a friend? Was there a line brother? Was there somebody supporting you through this journey of like being more authentic?
Hell no. No. No.
Let's back up. So you grew up in Detroit, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Detroit. I did my first 18 in Detroit.
And then you went to Tuskegee.
Then I went to Alabama. I went to Alabama because, my mother was like, I'm not paying for anybody's daddy or any jail bait to go to college. She didn't like, well, she loved my old girlfriend at the time is a family friend now. And she liked her, but thought we would get pregnant and I missed college and my parents both missed college. And so I was the first to go and graduate. And my mother was adamant about, you have to do it. I'm going to take on all the student debt, but you got to graduate. And if you don't, I'll kill you. And so, we were being at-risk youth, I think was the language back in the day, what Clinton called super predators. And we used to, I don't know how to say it. We were in jail for a bit in 1999. And, basically what we were doing, we're hitting department stores and selling goose down coats to boosters on Joy Road in Detroit, if anyone knows Detroit like that. And we got handcuffed and booked based on that. But our parents went to bat for us. They showed our college acceptance letter. It says like, these are good boys and with the wrong crowd. They wiped our records and we went to school, but my parents were sort of insisting that I had to get out of the city. It's living in New York City now. Detroit doesn't seem like the same type of city, but going to rural Tuskegee, Alabama, we were like city kids, wearing Gucci loafers with S curls, in Alabama. Right. We were those, we were little douchebags, to be honest, and we needed to reform. So yeah, I grew up in Detroit. I grew up, I was in high school in Detroit in the 90s. We were partying I remember when Aaliyah was, 15, hanging out on the scene downtown before she blew up and R. Kelly basically statutorily raped
So
her.
when did you come to the truth of your identity as being a Black bisexual man?
Woo! True. Around 30. I think I was out at 30.
Well, more than being out, I'm just talking about when did you start like, oh, hey, I'm bisexual?
I mean, I think it happens in phases. I would say, something in kindergarten, right? It's like you have the point where where you think something is different. Let's say that was 5 years old, right? So that's mid-80s. Then something is different in middle school, right? Around puberty. So let's call that the early 90s. And then you may say something about it or act on it, I was around 18. So 5, 13, 18, you always know. But, I remember going to college and I was like, I'm shutting this down. Like my number one objective is to be that dude. And I mean, if you know anyone who was at Tuskegee in the time that I was there, I think it's gonna sound horrible on camera, but I think they would confirm that I was that dude. So were my friends, and we
Tell me your Kappa or tell me your Kappa.
Exactly. Tell me what right. That stuff, right? And a while later, it's embarrassing, but now, I obviously being I would say a former politician at this point, you get used to talking about yourself. You get used to exploring those issues. And I've started to realize, over the course of the past 10 years, that they've helped people, at least these stories. I remember telling some of these stories. I did a speech at a university back in Detroit at Wayne State, which is downtown Detroit, they have a queer alliance for the business school. I'm a business guy, so I speak at a lot of business schools. And my parents were in the audience. And I talked about later in life starting the LGBT Chamber of Commerce in Detroit. And we started all those pride nights that people see at, for the NFL, NBA, NHL, and the MLB. And I think a lot of those young people in the B school at Wayne State, which is named after Mike Ilitch, the guy who founded Little Caesars and his family, they're like, you're this brave person. And I was like, actually, my whole engagement to this activist world was a proxy of, cowardice. I thought I could give myself an excuse by being the out dude in a suit, because when you are, as you say, like, tell me a Kappa without telling me you're a Kappa, the type of toxic guy that I was, you didn't want to lose any power, right? You wanted to be, if you could fake it all the way to being the man, you want to do that. And it was definitely, a man, that you wanted to be. And so you didn't want to be recognized in any sort of way as anything other. Anyway, so I would tell them that I was willing to take this role because I had an appointment working with the mayor at that time, but I think it's still the mayor now. And I was doing other work for him, totally unrelated, but was asked by the early board, the actual founding board, to come in and be the first CEO. And I'm a sort of entrepreneur in residence. I knew how to build an institution, tie it to a bunch of partnerships, scale it, communicate it, et cetera. And I used this skill set, but I think my parents, I looked at their faces, I was telling some of this story in a bit more crass way because it was off camera. And they were shocked that I said, I was terrified. And, I ended up getting fired by the mayor's team because my office was right next to the faith-based leader liaison. So it was my office. I ran some stuff for the chief information officer and the IT department out of the mayor's office, downtown Detroit. And right next to me was the religious guy. But in Detroit, that didn't mean, Buddhist and Muslim and Jewish and Christian. It just meant Christian. Detroit, for anyone who's not familiar, is like the Nashville of gospel music. And so they were like, you got to get this fag out of here. And that was a thing, around the office. They were talking like that. I knew I would get fired for doing that work. And I just thought, I remember one of my frat brothers who was a friend who was also mad at me because I didn't come out to him when we worked together years earlier in South Africa. He was,
what was he mad about?
That I didn't come talk to him, He was like,
why? What did he want to do? What was he going to do? Why?
People just want to know. I think one thing that I don't think the straight world explores with their, queer friends is coming out is not only about, you're fearful about how you'll be received by the world, but it's also the backlash of folks looking at you as a liar, as a complete fraud. And then they feel not only like, I think that we have worked hard via pride marches and marketing to ask for empathy for all of us as we gradually come out. But I don't think we've explored enough how the rest of the world feels betrayed, even though they are the same kind of folks who are like, pause, pause, pause every sentence. And you're like, well, this is why. I don't want to tell you what was what. But I remember getting fired from the city. And by this time we were still, tight. He was better than that. He was better than me. And he was little bro. I was spring 02, he was fall 02, same province, but he came up here to Columbia and hung out with these, these kids in New York. So he probably had more queer affirming chops than even I did at that time. And so he was like, you can never go back. So you can never go back from moonlighting as the straight dude to get the jobs that you want. You exposed. And if people won't give you the titles and the stature and quite frankly, the money that you think you've scaled to get to this point. See, in corporate world, you can hit a ceiling where even if you apply for parallel jobs, the hiring managers And the HR staff is like, why do you want this job? And you don't have an answer for him. He's just like, I got a really expensive car, so I need this job. I don't want to work for you. I don't like you. But what do you say? You're like, oh, well, I think I'm diligent and blah, blah, blah. And they ask you, what are your upsides? What are your downsides? Like, what are your cons? And, you're like, I don't know. I'm a bit self-absorbed and I'd rob this company blind if I could tomorrow. Is that a response? So anyway, my homie, my frat brother, my lawyer at the time was like, you've got to double down on you and not just like come out. You're like, you have to be out. You have to build institutions around the things that you care about to survive, because no one is going to offer you an olive branch that will sustain the life that you have. Just because life gets expensive. I think when people see folks make more money, they think you got it and you stacking it. Like, no, you still spending at that pace. You get first class money, you start buying first class tickets, even though I'm telling y'all, it's not worth it. Like, it's not that nice. I don't like flying at all. But anyway, a lot of that was happening, at once. And I was gradually getting to the point where I was like, I can be me. And I think some of it made me more activist. Some of it made me more angry. I think I leveraged a lot of Black man anger I had and added the queer Black man anger to it. And around that time, as I was figuring out who I was apparently, the 20-year-olds, an old man. And so these kids were coming out with even more force and even more, bravado. Like we run the world. And so I was inspired. I was like, well,
how were people who were deemed to be queer or other on campus at Tuskegee? Because I know that this
right now.
I'm talking about back when you were on about 01, 2000, because there
were no people, and that's the thing. I think when people ask,
but people knew somebody. I mean, it hadn't been out, but people.
Oh no, not at all. Like when I came out, people were shocked. There might have been one dude who was a cheerleader, for whatever cheerleaders. I was gonna say for the football team, but they cheered everywhere. Who later was like, and I was like, yeah, you probably caught me looking. He was my type. But the point is, no one else. Like when I came out, I remember, again, I went to school, it was 3,000 of us there at once. There were maybe two dudes who everyone knew were gay, but it should be understood to the younger people who will look at this recording that we didn't have that language. You just say, oh, that dude is a little effeminate, or he's got some sugar in his tank, but he's still gonna leave school, get married, have a bunch of kids, grow a beard, blah, blah, blah. Not that you can't have a whole lot of sugar and grow a whole lot of beard at the same time. I can't grow a beard at all. I'd love to, but it just won't work with, when I look at
I ask because I think it needs to be documented that gender performance impacts intake, right? So some people and their journey maybe mass play a game, do a thing to get on, because even though you're queer, you still want the same things you want to go to Black college, that's normal. So I'm just wondering how the time it was, but
I would say, it just in the way I'm presenting, again, philosophically, an argument could be made that everyone is in drag, right? All the time. And that this white
RuPaul
is my drag. Oh yeah, I do it. But before RuPaul was talking about that, like, we were all brilliant before RuPaul got on TV.
No, I'm saying, but RuPaul's a very popular comment is that we were all born naked.
Right. So we're all wearing drag every day. But as a bi guy, my drag was it wasn't far removed from who I am. I'm still trying to hoop and dunk on you. I'm still hollering at your girlfriend, even if my boyfriend is not somebody I'm talking about, in the year 2000. But the point is, I didn't have any of that in the year 2000. It was quite easy for me to just be me and not acknowledge any of this other stuff, any of these other feelings until I got out of school. What I will say is there was a guy, we got kicked off the yard, and there was a guy who is technically my sans, but didn't come back and didn't make line. And he was a very noticeably gay guy, right? I would just say, he was sort of film presenting, big guy. And we worked together in like the student service office. When I was a freshman, he was a sophomore. And we had one other colleague who worked with us who was also a sophomore. She brought her little brother, who was in high school at this time, to the office. and he's a Kappa too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and he you know, younger guy, tall, slim guy. He has some very obvious ways about him. I don't think what people don't know about closeted bisexual people is no matter what they see, what other people see, when we look in the mirror, we just see something terrible, something tragic, something ugly even. And so if folks want to pick up who's doing what, you see people who are constantly walking around checking themselves. And I remember thinking that this other guy who got his paperwork with us, that I was like, you know, he got to be gay or something, right? Like something, he giving me these vibes. But again, in 1999, we didn't really have that language. He was just a guy whose wrist did this when he was chilling. And I remember thinking what I thought about him, but I remember when our friend Ashley brought her little brother, Jason. I can talk about Ashley and Jason because they're very out and they're great people and they're still great friends to this day. As they came into office and Ashley wanted to introduce us to her little brother from Mobile, Alabama, they came into office. And I was at the back of the office and this other guy whose name we won't mention was, because I don't know where he is. And like, I know where he is, but I'll tell you about that in a second. He was closer to them. And as he walked in, like Jason came in the office and was like, hey, in this very hey way. And I was watching Sean because I was getting ready to, you know, be courteous and run over to the front of the office to talk to Ashley and Jason. So the guy in the middle, he like pauses when he recognizes how Jason is. And he looks over at the mirror. He does like a self-check, like, am I gay? Am I being gay right now? Let me get it off of me. And I think the normal person would have just been like, he looking to see like, do I have a booger in my nose, right? But for me, I recognized it immediately. I was like, oh, that's the check. Like, am I like bro-y enough right now? And so anyway, the day went on. He went and greeted them. I eventually made it up around the desk to the front of the office, and it was what it was. Later, you know, 2 years later, we were trying to get on. Everyone knew around campus who this other guy was. And they were just like, the Noops were like, ain't no way. Ain't no way. He went to the province and was like, they are blackballing me. They pre-pledged me. They're hazing me up verbally. Because I knew for a fact they weren't hazing them up physically. Because they was like, we don't want nothing to do with it. But province came, cracked down, and was like, this is messed up. Great student. He's got a 3.9 GPA, whatever he had, blah, 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 right? It's like, y'all letting all the bad students in, like James Felton Keith, because, you know,
he's popular though.
Because he throw parties and, you know, he got the, you know, ex-girl. So they did all that and then he got in. Now, years later, fast forward 10 years, this same guy, I was talking to some pro fights of mine. They were cracking inappropriate jokes and they didn't know about me. So let's say I'm in my late 20s at this point. And the guy that I mentioned in the middle who did the self-check, the am I too gay check, he's a pastor in the Metro Atlanta area, and he's a principal in education. Apparently, one of his students, now he's not the teacher, but he's a principal at the school, is the son of one of our pro fights from 97. Mm-hmm. And I calls around like, we gonna make up on a conference call a rumor about this guy, you know, messing with our kids. And we want, like, he don't have no business working out here. These are Black people. He's like, he don't have no business working in the school system, this and that. And so I called, you know, my technical Sands. And I was like, I mean, we don't treat them like Sands because they didn't come back with us, you know. But anyway, that's a longer story that we can get into later. But
tell me you pledged, but tell me you didn't pledge. Tell me you pledged.
Right. You know, I crossed 5 minutes, 33, you know, 5 hours, 33 minutes and 59 seconds on May 10th, and that kid was not there. But the point is,
Kappa seconds. Go ahead.
Right. I wanted to do him a solid, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was just like, warning, here's what people are saying about you. And that, you know, big, I'll say this dude's name because he annoys the hell out of me at this point. I was like, Chuck Smith and them are coming for you. And so his immediate response to me, the principal pastor guy, wasn't, that's ridiculous. I would never, blah, blah. It was, I'm a pastor and I'm married. And I was like, all right, that's gay as hell. So now that you are the gayest pastor we've ever met, I'm just giving you a heads up. I don't care what's going on down there and y'all little politics and rural Georgia County.
Let's get back to you, Jim.
Yeah.
So, do you have a moment you can pinpoint of saying this is my coming out story by anybody again story or no?
No.
That's fine. So let's talk about how you why Kappa did.
I was in Kappa League in the late 90s, in like 97, 98. And
Is Kappa League big in Detroit?
yep. And
It's not big in New York. I know they have one at NY but it's not.
Yeah, they do it NYA.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do it NYA. So I was in the one in Southfield, Michigan, which is just north of Detroit, because we were inner city kids and my parents were trying to get us into that Jack and Jill suburb crowd. The way Detroit used to work is you had to try to run to get out of it. And we get out because we were the single mom group out of everybody else in our family who was living far north of Detroit. So we joined that Kappa League, and it was just service. We didn't learn anything. I used to think Kappa spelled CAPH because that's how it made sense to me. Then I got to school, and there was, the Noops were cool. I was like, oh, they seem like me. And there was I'm a 6, my check man from 99 was like the coolest guy on the planet. And I was like, that's what we're doing, It's just it's a standard story,
So what's been the experience post being more authentic, being more, I guess, making your pieces whole?
Yeah.
With queerness and Kappa.
I think it's embracing now. There's still some brothers who absolutely hate me. When I was out, and again, I didn't do a coming out. I was just like, this is what I'm doing next, right? I was like, this is just who I'm dating. Like my husband now, we've been married for 10 years. When we started dating, we took a picture on a beach here, and he was hanging off of me. He had these little shorts on, and I posted it. And it didn't break the internet. We're not famous or anything, but in our little internet world,
it broke that.
Yeah. At one point, I think I took a screenshot on Facebook because this is pre-Instagram, and there were like 34,000 comments going on about me at that moment, because at this point, winning the twirling competition in 2003, I was a cane master up until yesterday. So for 20 years, I've been beating everybody at twirling canes, at least on the biggest stage, at Conclave, nationally, internationally. Just because that's what we did in Alabama. And I brought my Detroit piece to it. And I was like, well, we got rhythm. We cooler than you. That's what you think. Like if Smokey Robinson could twirl canes, he'd probably do it like me. But the point is, so everyone knew me in the frat, and there was this divide. People were like, fuck this fag. He cannot be the cane master. I can't believe y'all are learning how to twirl from this dude. And then other Noops was like, we love him. Like my line is a bunch of crazy people. So they were all like, if we hear anything, we're going to kill you. And we were the kind of line who was capable of that kind of violence. And so the people who know me, and I think that's why, being out, coming out, whatever young people are doing is so important, because the people who love you, love you. The people who don't care, the people who are straight, they're like, great, he's out of my way. Now I got to worry about him. I was always thinking about James Keith hollering at, my wife. They're like, good. And the ones who hate you, they probably like you, or like somebody who likes things that you like, So I think, and that's always been the case. I remember like my best friend, my oldest friend, who's not a Kappa, he was he had a sort of, we're older, so he had like a sort of Al B. Shore vibe to him. He was a bit of a playboy, had a lot of girls, and he would always get into fights with dudes because they'd always try to compete with him over whatever girl he was dating. But we never had the same taste. And I remember so I guess I should go back. I did have 2 sort of coming out stories, and it was basically to him and my mother. And it was just so that they understood explicitly what was going on. I was basically only telling him that half the stories I've been telling you about what I've been doing out in the world, half of those are dudes. So this is what it is. And he was just like, and I was nervous. I was shaking. I think I was visiting them at the time. I just happened to be in Charlotte on business. I was passing through the airport, and we were sitting down at some burger joint, and I was like shaking to tell him. He was like, just tell me. I was like, this is what it is. And he was like, no, that's you. And then he made a joke. He was like, now it makes sense why you liked all them little skinny, bald-headed boys that you was dating, that you called chicks. The reason we would never sort of bump heads, and the reason friends, would go after him, because, his type was basically like that tall, curvy, long hair, stereotypical what people like. And that's just never been my thing. And so we never really had a competitive nature about us. And so, so we did have that talk, but it plays back into how we were, on campus and who loved and hated me. Everyone who knew me well, who didn't have any incentive to compete with me, they just loved me. And it was in real life, and it was also on the internet, which again, at that time was Facebook. And everyone who didn't know me, not everyone, but a lot of people who didn't know me were like, we hate him. And I still get some of that now. Like I go to kind of like conclaves and, the national events, and, I see brothers and they're like, what is he going to do? Is he going to, I got a friend called a friend and was like, well, I get it. So James is out now. I get it. I'm fine. But is he going to come around? Is his shirt going to be tied in a knot now? And I was like, no, but if I thought if I didn't think that was tacky, and no offense to folks who doing what they do, there's plenty of tacky people out here. Now I don't like the way they dress, but if I wanted to show off, my stomach, I would, but to that point, like people were just confused. They just unfamiliar. So years on, people are starting to get it, also doing all the other stuff. Like I wasn't a big marriage equality person. I didn't think it was a possibility. I didn't think it was a real triumph, especially for poor Black people. But being married for so long and being visible has changed so many hearts and minds. You start to realize, you start telling people, yeah, I've been married longer than your parents have, to the same cat. And it changes what they think about, is possible. So, I am a true believer in that works, and that, pride is a protest, and just having any sense of pride about what you're doing, even if it's scary to do what you're doing, matters. And I've seen it change, again, a lot of people, at least everybody who was in my network from when I was in school and over time. But there are definitely some people who are still like, fuck him. And that's cool. Like we will beat the shit out of them in real life.
I want to ask you where you would feel most safe, but I feel like you're a goon, so you go feel safe everywhere you go.
I'm the only dangerous person I know, right? But that's why I'm worried. So my activism is really a proxy of that, right? I know that the world is not so safe, but because we are who we are, I dress up, I put on a tie now, but I'm still that same kid from Detroit. I think people.
We ask everybody who we do the interviews where they feel the most safe at. And some people talk about being safe in the gay club or in queer communities. Some people talk about being safe with their partner. So it could be anything, but it's important to talk about safety in problem because a lot of us don't have an emotional home. And physical safety is a thing that all of us in the community don't always feel it, right? If you are if you're small, if you're whatever it is, right? Skinnier, more feminine, the people prey on what you might perceive as weak. Although I grew up in Harlem, so all the feminine boys fought. So I'm like, I don't know.
I feel safe in Harlem. I'll tell you what, so we just built, and this is a result of sustained activism over time. I think some kid was asking me, how do you do this? So we built in a 23,000 square foot LGBT center, a Black LGBT center right here on 124th Street in Adam Clayton Powell. And it's just called the Harlem Center. We had some pushback from other community, more religious community stakeholders like, well, you should call it Harlem and throw some other words. And I was like, no, we taking the whole damn word. Harlem is what we say it is. And if you think you bigger, then come take it. Come take my name. But I feel safe in that space. But me and my folks, we the damn building. So we own the word now. Harlem is queer as hell right now.
It would always been queer as hell for the last 100 years. Has been queer as hell.
Exactly, right, since the 20s. But now it's very visible, and we will break you.
Let's talk about that, because I know you work with Gatekeeper Initiative, you work with Slate TV, you work with Out Greek Fest. Let's talk about some of the things you do for the community of Harlem, or the Black gay community, Black queer community in New York.
Well, I don't work with any one of them directly. So we run what we did politically when I got back to New York. So I came to New York, got a bunch of job opportunities, including a thing in Detroit to leave and do the chamber. And I came back. So I was hovering, right? I had a place here, but I'm hovering back and forth. And we built a coalition. We call it the Black and Latino LGBT Coalition. So it's about 30 plus organizations. So yeah, the Gatekeepers are one, but also New York City Pride, Black Pride, Harlem Pride, the Black Lesbian Conference. We got 300,000 members, right? So we carry weight.
So, but Black Pride's been around for a long time. It's been around for almost 30 years at this point.
Yeah, almost 30 years. It was not the oldest. Detroit and DC are older, started in 96, but we had to bring it in. Black Pride fell apart, and when Lee and them restructured it. So stuff is old ideologically, but it ain't old structurally. I'm old. Like what we did, we refixured everything.
You're not that old. I'm saying that.
Tell everybody that. I'm old. I'm old. I'm just, people are living a lot longer now. If I was born 100 years ago, I'd be close to death right now. But a lot of drugs and exercise and quality of life has changed that. So, I like to make no mistake about it. My grandparents all died around 59 and 51. So I'm old. I'm from a place where it's real niggerish, right? I use language like that. I'm not Jesse Jackson. I might not get to be 90. So I'm building a center right now. And so, yeah, we organize all those orgs, because I'm a business guy. We need a funding center. Black and brown queer groups only receive about 5% of the funding in this state and in this city. And it's a huge city, but yet we make up the majority of people, right? So we build institutions to fund initiatives that provide the safe spaces for kids who don't have what I have, like a pirate's mentality, right? So I do that. I've done a few other things here. We started Slate TV back in the day. I guess it really wasn't back in the day. The pandemic sort of killed it. But I would say we didn't have the right management team to really scale it. But we saw some successes there. We learned a lot. We educated a lot of people. We paid a lot of people. And I think that's the real objective. If we see real problems in our community, the objective is not just to talk about them as pie in the sky political issues, but try to understand what can we do on the ground to actually get checks in people's pockets. Like, people got to eat, people got to pay rent. The rent is high in New York, but it's high everywhere else. So we also caucus outside of here with prides and other orgs across the country and across the globe to make sure that everybody's taking care of their people, whether they're in, Denmark or Denver. We do that. I convened a group at World Pride in Sydney and in Copenhagen. It's every World Pride, for people who are not familiar, is every other year at some global city. In 2025, it'll be down here in DC. And we convene a group of chambers of commerce to funnel money to LGBT groups, globally. For people who don't understand, I'll explain sort of what the hack looks like. All activism from a minority standpoint has 3 prongs. There's social activism. Those are people you see in the streets. So for Black folks, that might be Black Lives Matter as of late, right? Or the NAACP back in the day, or even now. For queer folks, that's the Pride marches. And then you've got political activism. And those are like the equality groups. They're advocating for specific policy, right? And then you've got economic activism. And that's where people like me come in. So we're building chambers of commerce and trade associations to funnel money to both the street activism and the political activism, so that our wins can be recognized more tangibly. So my work is to go to corporate America and be like, you owe me a check, because I got Black bodies to feed up here in Harlem, or anywhere else for that matter. We just started the African LGBT Chamber of Commerce. We have 2 branches, one in Joburg and one in Lagos, and they just started doing their first conference. And what we're doing is we're holding multinational companies accountable. So think General Motors, Accenture, big insurance companies. If they say they love us in New York, you got to love us in Lagos. And even though people in Lagos will say we will kill you, they need to fund protection. If you don't write me a check, if you see me walking through your office, I'm there to beat somebody up. The whole damn world owes me a check. And if they don't send it, I'm gonna need
a hashtag. I've been following you for some time now, so you've been putting that on your social media. Well, last 2 questions. What do you feel the most proud of being a Black bisexual person?
You mean like from a work or accomplishment standpoint?
I'm talking about you. You talking about work. I'm talking about you. What
are you proud of?
Yes. I could have asked you what does pride must mean, but that's kind of corny. What do you feel the most proud of being Black and queer? Black, queer, and bisexual.
Oh wow. That's a question I haven't pondered answering yet. Outside of making a crass joke about things I might be proud of, I would just say that I've been I just say that I'm excited that I've been able to, keep up and be engaged long enough with my husband to where he's available to support all my crazy ideas, and that I can be transparent enough to feel like he's my actual friend, like my actual best friend. That's not like lovey, dovey story, just sitting on the couch talking about the way the world works. I guess being proud that I've been able to, practice what I preach, if you will, and bring that sort of ethic of transparency and inclusion, even including myself, my own identity, because that's what I wasn't doing, 20 years ago at school. I guess I'm becoming more and more proud that I'm able to keep pace with backing up all the shit that I've been talking about who I think I am, and that he's available to, help regulate and say, you're not doing it right now. You're faking it right now. And giving each other grace and being able to scale in that. I would say that's probably my most proud thing. And I think that bleeds over into all the other work for sure.
And my last question is, what can Kappa do to be more inclusive or more intentional about the people who are othered in their organization, like the queer people?
They can stop glorifying the abuse of women, period. Kappas are abusive. I won't speak for all the other orgs who I know are in a similar situation, but it is embedded in the culture of when you come into the organization. It's pimp or die is the thing they tell you. So it's like, do whatever is necessary to achieve the goal that we give you. And the goal that we give you is going to be insurmountable, whether it's a financial goal or a physical goal or things you have to achieve, given your existing schedule, which is to be a student. Even if you go alumni, they're going to give you ridiculous goals, and they'll say, manipulate anybody. But the easiest group for you to manipulate are those women who are supporting you. And I think that the very culture of the organization is antithetical to the values of life and inclusion and connectivity that we're constantly trying to advocate for in general. So I would say tamper that down. And then the other stuff will follow. But quite frankly, if I'm a young queer kid and I'm out right now and I'm 19 years old, I don't want to be a Kappa. I don't know how it's valuable.
I don't know. There's a lot of.
I know they do, but it's toxic. It's like the same reason why if I show up at a gay club in a suit with this shirt on, I'm gonna get all the looks, but I'm selling them straight white man. Everybody who's desperate needs to fall in love with daddy. It does not mean that daddy is handsome. I do think that I am, but that's a plus because I look better without all this stuff. Is what I'm saying.
Like, who made you? What's going on in the scroller? Like, what the?
You're right.
Anyway,
right.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true because it's I was talking to people about like people being trans, trying to get in D9, and I'm like, I'm worried about safety. Like, I know people who were visibly queer who got jumped in or jumped as an interest or online for across D9 things, and it is not safe, honestly. And either you be out and risk safety or risk social suicide, or play straight and then kill yourself emotionally and then marry, have children, and then like
later when it's chaotic. No, right? Like, look, one of my ships, one of my line brothers is bi. He's not out. I won't say his name. Won't put him on the spot like that. But we had one of those side conversations. Like, he's like, this your life. But he got the whole thing, the wife, the kids, multiple of them, etc. Look, I get that there is some perceived value in joining these orgs right now, and I don't want to discourage anybody. Again, I met at least 8, out brothers, whether they identify as gay or bi or something else, who have crossed in the last 3 or 4 lines. We've been having lines since, like, at least the guys I've been meeting, 2018, 19, 20, 22, 23, and good for them, right? But there are other fraternities now who are more affirming. And for everyone who's thinking, I need to join these orgs because they provide some prestige, these organizations are still what people make it. And if the people aren't modern and doing dope things, like, my biggest argument with not only Kappa, but other organizations is I'm not sure that all of the work that they think that they're doing in the communities are relevant anymore. Because the new argument, the new conversations, very much so what Malcolm X was talking about when he came back from Mecca. He was like, it's not just civil rights anymore. In order for us to move forward as a minority population, it's human rights. And so we have to build bridges with all of those other groups in order to withstand the very real threat from the most powerful people who hate us. This is about how we divide up power. And anyone talking about these organizations, as they are elitist organizations, they're inherently elitist. Like I inherently think that Kappas are better than Alphas and Qs and Sigmas because I look at what those others do and I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that. The point is, as we go through what we're doing, we're really talking about power and how we distribute it. And so,
or the perception of power.
Or the perception of power, right? Well, there's perception of power and there's real power. When you have numbers, you have some power. But what I'm saying is these young queer kids, if they're building power and doing activism and innovating and finding advantages in different places, then they need to corral their power. That's exactly what we did here at what has become the Harlem Center. When we started, many of the groups around us were like, why don't you just funnel into the group that we're doing? Because they were like, we had, Black Muslims, Black queer Muslims, we had Black queer Christians, we had the Pride people, we had business people, and everyone was doing their thing in silos. But as we talked about power and our ability to come together, we are by far the largest socio-political force in the area. And like we're dealing with elections coming up next month. And you have to call us. If you don't call us and you're talking about anything uptown in Manhattan or really anything across the 5 boroughs, then we're going to be offended. That's real power. That's not faux power. And so these orgs, whether the sororities or the fraternities, they have some real power. My point is, it doesn't always have to exist the way it does. And what I found, at least in being an entrepreneur, after I was kicked out of corporate America for being too gay, right? It happened. What I found is the best way to get your piece back is you have to hack your way in. You have to bring a powerful offering to the table. And so I just think young people should understand that no matter what org you join, you will not be given any sort of keys to the kingdom. And even when you join these orgs, they tell you to join it to be of service to the organization. It's like, you're not going to get over here and get something new. You're going to come in and day one, after you pledge or whatever your process is, and you think you got over the hill, you start right back at the bottom, and the old bros treat you like you don't know nothing, and you don't. So I think the perception of power is very enticing to these young people, but it's not real. But there is some actual power on the other end, but it does not mean that you get to access it being who you are. And so, I think we should always be aware of that. I definitely use cane twirling to sort of provoke some of that. And I was like, what, you gonna be mad at the cane master? I taught your kids how to shimmy. When kids are doing that shimmy, we made that up. All of that up here and the shoulders and stuff. I will tell you a story just so that it's published on this podcast. In 2002, there was a club called the Rose Supper Club in Montgomery, Alabama. And this is not, I had some kids, I was like, what are you doing when you're doing this by your ear and you shimmy it? And he was like, that's swag, old man. Now, this was 10 years ago, so no one said swag now. They said that 10 years ago. I was like, that's not swag, it's whipped cream. And when we were underage, 20, drinking at this club, there was a bar upstairs that the Noops were at, and there was a bar downstairs for everybody. And at 12 midnight, there's an event called the Cream Session. You come down with whipped cream and you spray it on the wildest girls in the party because they want you to spray it on them, blah, blah, blah. Totally consensual. But you have to shake the whipped cream up so it doesn't butter out.
Yeah.
And so we were walking down steps, shaking it. And our shimmy at that time was a very fast one, but we're doing it very slow till we get to the bottom. And that became what we would do for every cream session. And then YouTube happened some years later, and all the recordings of us got on the internet. And so these kids are doing a very queer thing when you break it down. And my point to young people who are like, I want to be an Alpha, I want to be a Kappa, I want to be Omega, is it doesn't have to be as grand as you think it is tomorrow, as long as you are as cool as you think you are. These organizations, institutions consist of two or more individuals. And if you don't, then just go out and be it. Go out and be it, build an institution, make them court you into the institution if you are going to join. If not, it's probably not worth it for what you need going forward. So.
Well, thank you for allowing us to be your witness. Baby, everybody need a witness. for this colorful conversation about your experience being a Kappa. Where can people follow the work you're doing? How can they support you in the work that you're doing?
I don't know if they can follow my work. I'm sort of behind the scenes. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know. I'm on all the social media. I mean, just
no, but inclusive. What is it called? Inclusive.
So my actual work, I guess the thing I did. So we do some of this activism. I think people can follow the Harlem Center if they care about queer stuff. But I run an insurance company, so I'm in insurance. I run a company called Inclusion Corporation.
Yes.
We do three things. We underwrite corporate employment practices liability insurance and directors and officers insurance. People who aren't familiar, these are the sorts of insurances that get triggered when you leave your company and sue them and they pay you off. Right now, that number is too high. So they need better methods to vet the risk of these companies. So we do that. We also provide the software for those companies to do that, for big insurance companies to do that. And last but not least, we are the largest certifying body in the international ISO 30415 standard for diversity and inclusion. So there's an international standard that, again, as a proxy of me being an out activist, I was invited to the table to help write this standard with about 2,000 people in Geneva. And now that we have the standard, insurance is aware of what companies should be doing from a people management standpoint, but we call it diversity and inclusion. So we are a certifying body, we're a software company, and we're an insurance underwriting institution. And so that's what I do at Inclusion Corporation. People can Google that stuff. I don't think anyone on Instagram can help my work. I'm the boogeyman. I'm here to help you out. I don't need none of y'all's help. But
it's important for them to be able to find you, know that you exist, because maybe they may know somebody who could. I don't know. We don't know because our community works.
Yeah, I mean, sure. We don't get business. Like, our business is B2B. People don't sort of walk through our doors like I need help. But yeah, I mean, if they just inclusioncorporation.com is where the company is. And again, I'm James Felton Keith everywhere on social media. I use LinkedIn more than Instagram, although Instagram is fun for memes and sharing basketball updates with my friends. But yeah, that's where I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope this conversation can help inspire people to the community, especially the queer Kappas, because y'all need each other.
Yeah, we definitely do. I suppose. Yeah, we need all the Kappas to come out, at least a little. Come to Harlem, holler at some folks. I think we out here. Don't be scared.